Hello, my name's Heidi and I work for Casey Cadinia Libraries, and I'm here today to do a very important job, which is interviewing Heather Lawson, the project worker for South East Hotspots, which is a project funded by the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. And the project is all about staying safe in extreme hot weather. Hi Heather, how are you today?
Good, Heidi. And I think we had a taste of hot weather earlier this week. So we're starting to get acclimatised to it. And at the beginning
Yes.
of the season, I think everyone finds it quite demanding when we have hot days. Later on in February, we're a bit more accustomed to it. But at the beginning, it's quite challenging for us.
Absolutely. And those extremes can still take us by surprise, can't they?
They can. And I think one of the important things is for people to understand that heat is something you have to be aware of and prepare for. And it's so important to get the message out because we tend to come from spring into summer and continue doing the same sort of things and aren't always prepared for those hot days and just expect to be able to go out and, run and exercise as we have in the past. But in summer, we need to be very wary and look after ourselves and our family and also our pets, of course.
Yes, absolutely. So, how common are heat waves and those extremely hot days in Victoria, Heather?
Well, at the moment in Melbourne, they say we have about 8 days that are over 35 degrees on an average. And in the future, by 2040, that'll double. So we've really got to think about the future and how we can prepare ourselves for it. And I think that when we're looking at our climate, we know it's changing. And Melbourne itself, when we say a heat wave, the description of it is 3 days where the average temperature between day and night is over 30 degrees. Now, it doesn't happen very often at the moment that we get 3 days in a row. We generally, fortunately, get a cool breeze in the afternoon. So a heat wave, it could be 40 degrees in the day and go down to 20 at night. So averaging out, that's 30 degrees. And you need 3 of those in a row to be an official heat wave. But
Okay.
it doesn't mean that, even if we have 2 days in a row, it can still get very hot and our home warms up very quickly.
So, on that note, then, is there anything that we can do to prepare for heat waves in advance? How can we set ourselves up?
Well, I think that really one of the important things is to be aware that some hot weather's coming. So listen to the forecasts and then prepare. And if you had something planned for the middle of the day, really try and either cancel that or postpone it, or do it in the beginning of the day or at the end of the day when generally it's a bit cooler. So really thinking ahead, and not just because you've got an appointment in the middle of the day, keeping that appointment when it's 40 degrees outside. So thinking about that. The other thing too that you can think about is, what's happening with my neighbours? How are they getting on? People particularly who live alone, and older people, people with a disability and young children are very much at risk in the heat and aren't always aware that they need to drink plenty of water. That's the most important thing. Even if you're not thirsty, drink water
Okay. So,
because, you use, when you drink water, you're able to perspire and cool your body. And so it's really important to replace that water that you're losing through evaporation off your skin.
fantastic. Thank you. So, I'm just thinking too, like you mentioned, keeping an eye on others. Like, I've got an older neighbour that, I sometimes do worry about. Is there a way I can sort of check in on him without, causing a little bit of offence to make sure he's doing okay?
Well, look, hopefully it's not just because it's a hot day you're checking in on your neighbour. You've got a relationship with the person
True.
and, you can just say, how are you going? It's pretty hot, isn't it? And really make sure that they are having plenty to drink because that is the most important thing. to drink water, really is. And to eat light foods. Don't heat up the house with the oven going. Have salads and things like that. And one of the other things we don't realise, although when you walk past your television or your computer, you can feel the heat coming out of it. So turn off those electrical items that you're not using, because they generate heat and warm up your house.
And our houses are full of them these days, aren't they?
They are. They're everywhere. And pull down your blinds.
Great.
And then also, if you're fortunate and you've got the opportunity to plant some trees around your home, make sure that they're shading your home in the summer, and then if they're deciduous, the light's coming in the winter. But really think about how your house is set up, and in the evening, hopefully it's cool and you can open the windows and let the cool breeze blow in and cool your house naturally. Because one of the things people often say to us when we're doing these presentations is, oh yes, we just turn the air conditioning on. But unfortunately, we've had experience where sometimes the power goes out and the air conditioning isn't operational. And sometimes people live in places where windows aren't able to be opened either. So
yes,
it's really important, if you can in the evening, to cool your house down again. And of course, wearing loose clothing, cotton, natural fibres, to keep your body as cool as you can.
And I guess touching on the air conditioning situation again, we kind of assume everyone has access to that these days, but there are people, myself included, we've only got the old, couple of fans going. Is there any way that, you can use those in a better way to make sure you're cooling the place down effectively?
Well, there are, Heidi. And look, it's been fascinating talking to people about heat and how they manage, and the tips that they've given me. All sorts of ideas people share when we have these discussions. And one of them is they fill up a bottle with water and freeze it, put it in front of their fan, and then the fan blows the air through the iced water, and it is much cooler than just having the fan going. So very simple things like that.
Clever,
and also,
I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it?
Yes,
and also, the old hand fan, just to circulate the air on yourself and keep yourself cool. And if it's really hot, just getting some cold washes and putting them around your neck or over your waist, around your wrists, just to cool yourself off, because it's on those pulse areas, it really cools you off and it feels much more comfortable.
I hadn't heard that before. So if we try and cool down the areas where our main pulses are, that's where we should focus. Okay.
That's right. So particularly around your neck, and you know how quickly your head gets hot. So really keeping your head as cool as you can, and always wearing a hat when you're out in the sun.
Yes, absolutely. Or I was just thinking too, Heather, you mentioned another particularly vulnerable group before, and if you could tell me a little bit more about that. Small children, like in terms of keeping them safe in the heat, what can you tell me there?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, Heidi. And I think, unfortunately, we've seen, situations where children have been out in the sun and the heat for too long and really suffered with dehydration. And so it's important that they are encouraged to drink. And if they're not going to drink water, you can encourage them with maybe just an ice block in their mouth to keep them, as cool as you possibly can. In a cool bath under the sprinkler. I remember as a child getting under the sprinkler and running around.
Me too.
With hardly anything on in the backyard. But it's always to just monitor your children, because they're not aware that they're dehydrating, and they're also not able to regulate their heat as well as we are as we get older.
Okay.
So helping them to understand that it's important to drink plenty of water and just keep themselves hydrated. And a baby we'll often see little ones who've got heat rash. So just minimal clothing, a nappy, and as I said, a cool bath, or not cold, but a cool bath, shower, whatever they'll do to try and get their temperature, keep their body cool is really important. Yeah. And the other really big thing is make sure you don't leave children, animals, or anyone in a car because the temperature rises so quickly. You may think you're only going to be a couple of minutes, but in 5 minutes, the temperature can rise, 20, 30 degrees. It is just incredible how hot a car can get.
In just a few minutes.
In a few minutes. So it can be, deadly for a little one. So really think about that. And I think there's been campaigns for people to always look in their back seat or put something on their back seat so that they have to get it out when they get out of the car and they'll see their child there.
As a bit
So
of a reminder.
it is a very important reminder.
Because we still have tragedies, don't we, every year?
Unfortunately, we have, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just a reminder for everyone to check your back seat before you get out of the car and make sure you take your children or your animals out of the car when you leave. Because
no matter how short.
Yeah, you may be held up. You may think you're only going to be a minute or two, but you may be held up.
Sure.
That's really important.
Now, touching back on animals again, I, of course, got my dog Rusty. And I'm, often out at work in the day and it could be quite hot and Rusty's at home on his own. Is there anything else you might be able to give me as a tip to keep Rusty, or if I've got any cats or bunnies or any other sorts of animals at home, how to keep them happy and safe?
Look, it is really important that we be aware of our animals. And one of the things, if the ground's too hot for the back of your hand, it's clearly too hot for your animal's paws as well. And they can burn their paws and that can be really, very dire for them.
Oh.
The other thing, people often will put ice blocks in their drinking water so they can, it's not going to boil up. Some people will put their dog inside. And that's all very well if the dog can get out to relieve itself. But, and the laundries are often cool spots for animals to be in. Or make sure they've got a shady area under a tree where they can go. And if they've got a kennel, make sure that's somewhere shady. Although most animals, I think, they seem to be able to find a cool spot.
They're pretty clever as long as they've got access to it, aren't they?
Exactly. And I always make sure I've got water out for the birds, and it's lovely to watch them come and drink at it, but it does evaporate. So you need to watch and fill it up quite regularly.
Okie doke.
For the birds.
I've heard a tip too. Are you meant to pop rocks or something in the bowl so the little birds and animals can get in and out easily?
That's right, because if it's too deep, if they fall in and their wings are all wet and they can't fly out, they can drown. So we don't want that.
No.
So something to perch on so they can still get a drink of water. But that's a good tip, Heidi. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. All right, I might just change tack a little bit with something else I've been thinking about on those really hot days. As you were saying, Heather, if we've got 2 or 3 days where it's hot both day and night, it's really not cooling off at all, and the house is really hot. What about things like medications? Are there things like that we need to be thinking about, whether they're still safe to use after such heat exposure?
There are, Heidi, and if you look at medications, a lot of them will say store under 25 degrees. Now, often our house gets warmer than that inside. Right. So it's best to check with your GP or your pharmacist and say, look, should I put this in the fridge or what should I do with my medications? Because sometimes if they do get over the 25 degrees, they may not have the same impact that they're meant to have for you, and you may find that you're not feeling as well as you should. So and also sometimes people on particular medications when it is very hot, those medications don't work as well for them, even if they're okay and haven't been impacted by the heat. But just because of the heat, it doesn't work so well for people. So
in terms of how the body's processing it can be
that's
a
right.
bit tricky. Okay.
Yeah. So it's best to talk to your GP or your pharmacist about your medications and just, follow up with that. Because I think if you look at the box, you'll see store under 25 degrees generally. So
do you find that a lot of people, you sort of assume that that's not that significant, but actually it turns out it can be, obviously, from what you're saying?
Yeah, it can be. It can have quite an impact for people. And one of the other things too, just talking about the heat, Many people, when we've been chatting with them, they've said, when I ask, what do you do on a hot day? Because your house is, very hot. They say, oh, we go to the movies, or we go to we go to the swimming pool, or we might go to a shopping centre. But also, more recently, people have been saying, yeah, I go to the library. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, it is. It's great because the library is a cool spot. You don't have to spend money. You can enjoy all the offerings that are available at your wonderful libraries. And it's just a spot where you can be cool and without having the pressure of, having to buy something.
Exactly. And stay for a longer period of time too.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but to do that, people need to plan a bit ahead because you don't want them out in the sun waiting for a bus to get to the library in the middle of the day. So just that, I think, is one of the important messages, to plan ahead when you know there's going to be really hot weather. And others will say, oh, I go to my friend, they've got air conditioning and it's cool at their place. And we've more or less arranged this ahead of time, that if
Great.
it's my house gets unbearable, we can go there. So planning ahead is really an important thing to do.
So you can be moving around before you're really hitting that hot
Oh,
time of
yes,
day. Yep, great
exactly.
idea.
Exactly, Heidi. Yeah, yeah.
Slightly, on a very related kind of area, what about smoky days? Like last year, our whole community experienced, ongoing issues with smoke. What are the impacts there, and how can we sort of manage that a little bit better for ourselves?
Well, I think last year was a real wake-up call for all of us, and Melbourne wasn't as impacted as Canberra and and Sydney
Hmm.
was impacted, but it just shows that when the bushfires were on and the smoke started to blow in our direction, um, a lot of people who had respiratory or cardiac heart conditions were really unwell, and there was a great increase in the number of emergency presentations and
Mm.
ambulance call outs for those people. So it's and it's sort of it's a difficult thing because the message is to close your house up, and when it's so hot,
Hmm.
even if you were to open it in the evening, the smoke would be coming in. So it's a real challenge for people who have those conditions that are impacted by smoke, to manage the smoke plus the heat. So it's something that we really need to prepare and think about how we're going to do it. Uh, but hopefully this year we'll not have the fires, and we'll be able to manage. But also, a lot of people, we know people died in the bushfires, but people also died uh, due to the smoke. That impacted on their cardiac condition or their respiratory condition, and people did die during that period from the impact of smoke.
Mm.
So
So it's extremely serious, and I think in some of the information you sent on earlier too, that heat in itself, I'm not sure if we touched on that heat in itself is actually a much more significant killer than we might realise.
yeah, it is. And I was really surprised when I first heard this. And what the statistics show, that more people have died in Australia through heat-related illness and in heat waves than
Mm.
in all the other natural disasters combined. So that's like floods, cyclones, bushfires, storms, all of those things, floods. So it's quite staggering, really, that so many people have died through the heat-related illness. And I think we heard a few years ago in France where 15,000 people died during a summer heat wave. And, it's unbelievable to us that can happen.
That's
And people,
extraordinary.
it is, isn't it? It's just, yeah, remarkable thing to
And
think about.
underlines the importance of the project you're doing and getting the word out to the community so that people understand that this is something
Yeah,
they really do need to think about in advance.
yeah. And also, many people who've come to our areas in Casey and Cardinia, they have been They've come from other countries, and in those countries, it may have been hot, but a lot of them in the middle of the day, they, not so much had a siesta, but they weren't rushing around doing things. And their accommodation, their housing was well designed to manage the heat.
Yes.
Whereas ours, unfortunately, a lot of our accommodation isn't thermally comfortable. And I think that we still go on and rush around and do everything that we think we should, whereas we should be taking it easy when it's hot weather.
And taking
really
it into account.
Yes, yeah, we should be.
All right, Heather, well, that's actually lots and lots of information for us to help prepare ourselves, which is fantastic. Thank you. But if people were wanting a bit more information or find out a bit more or sort of go back over those points, where could they find out that information?
Well, they can make contact with me at Enliven. There is also some wonderful information on the Better Health channel, which the Department of Health and Human Services run, about staying safe in the heat. And a lot of that information is also available in multiple languages.
Great.
So it's, and they're very short videos and specific for older people or families with young children or people who have an illness. So there's a lot of information there, but they can make contact with me at Enliven, and my number is 0409 214 606 or heather@enliven.org.au. But you can probably see that later on the film.
Yes, we'll have that at the end, I think. We'll be able to remind people of the contact details via a slide. So that'll be fantastic, Heather.
Thanks, Heidi.
Well, I have actually learned so much today, and I think I'm going to be a little bit better prepared next time my hot little house starts to get really warm and Rusty and I start to suffer with the heat.
That's good, Heidi.
So thanks very much.
Remember to drink water. Drink plenty of water.
Will do.
Most important point.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Heidi.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.